congratulations on The Furnace. I was able to check this out when it was in the cinemas, so congratulations on such a fantastic film.
Oh, wonderful! You're one of the few people that got to see it. God bless you.
I should start off by saying that. How important is it for you for this film to come out now on VOD and DVD and Blu-ray? Because the film came out in Melbourne in the middle of the lockdown. So for a lot of people, they never got that opportunity to go along and watch it in the cinema. So what was that like for you with your film coming out in the middle of a pandemic like that?
Well, from memory, we were actually maybe 2 weeks. We released on the 10th of December, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the lockdown finished maybe like 10 days or 2 weeks before that. But it didn't mean that people were in Victoria were, keen as mustard to get out to the cinema again. Like, I guess poor old Melburnians or Victorians had such a long lockdown that it seems it really did actually kind of rewire the brain a little bit in terms of how, one interacts with public spaces and entertainment. And so I feel like that there wasn't yet that willpower to jump right back into a cinema crowded with people. And so, from what it appears, that did affect us, and how many people in Melbourne got to see the film. And so that leads me to answer your next question regarding the VOD and Blu-ray and DVD release, which is, it's fantastic. The film can live in this other form. And we made a film that was meant for the big screen. It's a fairly sprawling, sweeping frontier mythology, tackling some pretty big themes. So it was really made for the big screen, but people have pretty big screens at home these days, so hopefully the experience won't at all be diminished.
Definitely. You talked about the themes of the film there as well. Tell us a little bit about what sparked you with this film. Like, what was it about this film where the original idea came about and you decided this is the film I want to make?
Well, I guess sort of interwoven within the film are themes of nation building and the search for identity in a new land, and gold fever and madness and a rite of passage. But before I kind of landed on those themes, it all just really started with accidentally covering the history of the Cavaliers when I was researching. Just generally, I was researching West Australia's 1890s gold rush because it always struck me as a pretty good backdrop for a story. And in the process, I stumbled upon this black and white image of a Cavalier in his traditional garb, flanked by camels, but in the otherwise very familiar Australian outback. So I had no idea what I was looking at when I saw this image, and it struck me as being highly cinematic from the get-go. And so I was compelled to dig deeper and research more, and came to discover that the Cameleers, who were a multitude of peoples who came from Afghanistan, India, Persia, parts of the Middle East, were Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, that they were here in their thousands at the peak of their population, and played a really critical role in laying the foundations of crucial infrastructure for Australia, like the telegraph line, the railroad, and the roads, and they're sort of the unsung pioneers of our inland, and this goes back over 150 years ago. So at that point, it struck me as a huge historic omission that this history wasn't more widely known. So that's really the source of all my zeal to try and tell a story that mythologizes this history, because not only have they been sort of largely written out of history, but because that history isn't more widely known, they've also missed out of their opportunity to be mythologized and woven into the mythologizing of the outback and the frontier. So that's really what this film is about.
I know in my previous career as a researcher, sometimes when you go back to go through history like that, and it is something that's not widely known about, it's quite hard to find details about it. How difficult was it for you to go back then and find more information out about the Cameleers?
Look, I was very fortunate that there were a few fantastic writers and historians who had already laid the foundations for research for me to draw on. One of them was Emeritus Professor of History, Geoffrey Bolton, who I actually developed quite a good friendship with, and he was a little bit of a mentor prior to dying in 2015, I think. And then Hanifa Dean, who is a Muslim author and academic, and she ended up being one of our primary Muslim consultants on the project. And her grandfather was a Cameleer who worked in the Kalgoorlie gold rush in the 1890s, and so she had a personal lineage and story that could help inform a lot of my thinking. And then I did broader consultation with the Muslim community here in Western Australia and the Sikh community, because of course the Cameleers were also Sikhs, and really that was about, I guess, first submitting myself and my intentions as a blue-eyed, blonde-haired white fella to tell the story to those community groups and seek their blessing, and most critically their input, their collaboration. So in the case of the Sikh community, our primary Sikh consultant is a lovely fellow called Harjit Singh, and he, like Hanifa, read the drafts of the script and helped me fill in the blanks beyond what I could kind of ascertain from books, and what little bit of history had been documented in books. So, and then of course there's the whole other dimension of the project with the Yamaji Bodhimaya community, who are the custodians of that Midwest Mount Magnet region. And so there was a hugely rigorous consultation process with them, not just for the cultural components in the script, but also in the language translation, because there are, of course, scenes spoken in the Bodhimaya language in the film.
Yeah. So from that original seed being planted and that research being done, how long then did you actually spend on the script? Was this a long-term project for you, or was it something where the words just seemed to flow really quickly?
It took years. So, as you've just inferred, I had to feel like I had a firm grasp on the history that I sort of, I'd done the equivalent of a sort of a thesis project just on the history, and then when I felt confident enough, I could have a crack at trying to dramatize it, and narrativize it, because I'm not an aspirant academic. I'm a filmmaker, and I really believe in the power of storytelling as a bridge to engage people in subjects that they might not have had the opportunity to. And so you do that by crafting a compelling and entertaining tale, and that's what this is first and foremost. It's a piece of entertainment, despite all of its sort of loftier socio-political kind of commentary. But I wrote 12 drafts or thereabouts of one version of the story, and then I realised it sort of got away from me, and it wasn't quite tonally where I wanted to land, and it was big and sprawling and not realistic. So, I threw that version in the bin and started again, and that was quite a scary moment, because you've put a lot of time and effort and resources into developing the script to that extent, but I needed to start again, and I managed to start again with quite a bit of clarity. And the story that we have today is pretty much holds true to the first draft of this next version of the story. So, and then I did more drafts than I'm prepared to confess to of that version of the story. So yeah, it's been a long, winding, multifaceted journey to get the script right. Really, I learned how to write over the course of writing this project, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, perfectly, yeah. And, of course, you had that huge step as well, going from making short films to making a feature film. How did that feel? I know a lot of filmmakers out there who want to take that next step are probably asking, what does that step feel like for a filmmaker when you go from shorts to a feature like this?
Well, I guess it depends on the kinds of shorts that you made before you leapt into your first feature film. But the two shorts that I made prior to The Furnace were, they were period films, and they had a lot of world building and were quite design oriented. So, to be honest, The Furnace just was a longer version of that in that regard. Obviously, there was a lot more cast involved in The Furnace than any of my short films. But I really just think it's the endurance of a feature film versus a short film that's probably the most confronting part of the process. That you really are under the pump, subjecting yourself to about as much sort of physical and mental stress as you can really for quite a prolonged period of time. So it's just about having that staying power, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. I guess you also know that it will end, so you can really thrash yourself because you know there is an end in sight. You can collapse in a heap at the other side. So I think that helps.
Definitely. And you put together such an amazing cast as well. The cast are really, really strong and powerful in this film. Did you go into the production knowing who you wanted to have in this film, or did that all come through casting?
It really was different from character to character. So the role of Mal was written for David Wenham from the get-go. So I was delighted when he read the first draft. This is kind of the second version of the story, just for context. When he read the first draft and said yes to the role and was keen to jump on board, and that was at quite an early stage as well. So that was fantastic. And then characters like Wurak and Mandu were a little bit similar in that I'm a big fan of the Jukimama dance troupe, and I saw those lads perform at Perth Fringe Festival years ago, before Bakerley did the Nightingale, actually, and I said those guys, I reckon, would be great in those roles. And then Bakerley got cast in the Nightingale and went on his incredible journey, winning awards at Venice, and I was suddenly fearful that I might not, that my little film might not be of interest, but luckily we got him a script, and he leapt at the opportunity, and I think really was super keen to play a Yamaji Budimai man and do his bit to help preserve their language, which is spoken in the film. And then in other instances, I should add, of course, my wife painted Trevor Jamieson for her 2017 Archibald submission. So Trevor Jamieson, who plays Kubering, is basically extended family. So we always knew that he was going to play this senior elder Kubering in the film. And then quite a different process, trying to cast the role of Hanif was very difficult. Trying to find that individual with that special something. And there was a lot of pressure on casting that role because they were going to carry the entire film. It's Hanif's story. So we didn't want to make a decision impetuously. And we did try initially and cast within Australia. And we were working with Nikki Barrett for auditioning actors for the role of Hanif. And we found some fantastic actors, but we just still weren't satisfied that we found that special someone specifically for this role. And it was only when, like an ignorant white man, I typed Middle Eastern actors into Google almost as a joke because I was sort of at my wit's end trying to find someone for the role that, like a needle in a haystack, this little extract from an Egyptian soap opera, much like Home and Away or Neighbours, pops up, and I watched it, and at the centre of this clip was this young man, Ahmed Malik, and his performance was incredible, really emotionally generous, and even though they were all speaking Arabic and I didn't know what anyone was saying, I was just sort of really transfixed and glued to this young man, and so I sent it on to my producers, and they responded the same way, and then we reached out to him, And little did I know that Ahmed Malik is a real superstar in the Arab world. So he, to his immense bravery, was just keen as mustard to jump on board the film and travel to Australia, a place he'd never been before, and work with a whole bunch of people that he didn't know from a bar of soap, and speak do his English language debut, but also speak in Pashto because he was playing an Afghan, and also learn the indigenous Badimaya language. So I really tip my hat to his bravery in going on this adventure with us.
Awesome. Well, mate, it has turned out to be an absolutely fantastic film, and I know we are running out of time. So just before I go, I'd love to ask, what would you like to say to people out there before they sit down to watch The Furnace, especially to those Melburnians that are probably watching it for the first time?
Oh, goodness. It's almost about saying as little as possible. So you just let it wash over you. But, look, I got to say, I'm not really sure, mate. I'm a bit lost for words, having rattled on with verbal diarrhea for ages. What would you say? What do you reckon?
I would just say go into this film expecting something really, really special, and that's exactly what you're going to get.
Brilliant. You can,
awesome.
You can quote yourself.
I will do, mate. Well, thank you so much for chatting to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to see what next film project you're going to be working on.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's been real good fun.
Not a problem. I'll let you go. Have a great day.
Same to you, mate.
See you, mate. See you, Grant.
Bye.